Howdy, squirrel listeners! Chapter 9 is called A Morning in Market Basing. "Ah, well," said Mrs. Copley as she bustled out of the room, "another day. That's what I always say when I wake up." Did I already read this? Hang on. Excuse me. Yes, I think I did. I picked up the other. Yep. I think we're on chapter 10. Yes, because the last thing was something hit her on the back. She was looking for that gravestone, and she found, it says, "Here lies Lily Waters." Tuppence drew a deep breath. She was conscious of a shadow behind her, but before she could turn her head, something hit her on the back of her head, and she fell forwards onto the tombstone into pain and darkness. And yet, then I told you it said book 3, missing a wife. I think I did. Maybe not. Yeah, I used my other Kindle, but it usually stops me if I bookmark it. It's anyway, it didn't. So, a conference. Yeah, I read this. A conference hyphen and after. I got this stupid post-nasal drip. "Well, Beresford," turn back around, right? "Well, Beresford," said Major General Sir Josiah Penn, KMG, CB, DSO, speaking with the weight appropriate to the impressive stream of letters after his name. "Well, what do you think of all that yakety-yak?" Tommy gathered by that remark that old Josh, as he was irreverently spoken of behind his back, was not impressed with the result of the course of the conferences in which they had been taking part. "Softly, softly, catchy monkey," said Sir Josiah, going on with his remarks. "A lot of talk and nothing said. If anybody does say anything sensible now and then about 4 beanstalks, immediately get up and howl it down. I don't know why we come to these things. At least, I do know. I know why I do. Nothing else to do. If I didn't come to these shows, I'd have to stay at home. Do you know what happens to me there? I get bullied, Beresford. Bullied by my housekeeper. Bullied by my gardener. He's an elderly Scot, and he won't so much as let me touch my own peaches. So I come along here, throw my weight about, and pretend to myself that I'm performing a useful function, ensuring the security of this country. Stuff and nonsense. What about you? You're a relatively young man. What do you come and waste your time for? Nobody'll listen to you, even if you do say something worth hearing?" Tommy, faintly amused that despite his own, as he considered, advanced age, he could be regarded as a youngster by Major General Sir Josiah Penn, shook his head. The general must be, Tommy thought, considerably past 80. He was rather deaf, heavily bronchial, but he was nobody's fool. "Nobody would ever get done at all if you weren't here, sir," said Tommy. "I like to think so," said the general. "I'm a toothless bulldog, but I can still bark. How's Mrs. Tommy? Haven't seen her for a long time." Tommy replied that Tuppence was well and active. She was always active. Used to make me think of a dragonfly sometimes, always darting off after some apparently absurd idea of her own, and then we'd find it wasn't absurd. Good fun," said the general with approval. "Don't like these earnest, middle-aged women you meet nowadays. All got a cause with a capital C. And as for the girls nowadays," he shook his head, Not what they used to be when I was a young man. Pretty as a picture they used to be then. Their muslin frocks, cloche hats they used to wear at one time, do you remember? No, I suppose you'd have been at school. Had to look right down underneath the brim before you could see the girl's face. Tantalizing it was, and they knew it. I remember now, let me see, she was a relative of yours, an aunt, wasn't she? Ada? Ada Fanshawe. Aunt Ada? Prettiest girl I ever knew. Tommy managed to contain the surprise he felt that his Aunt Ada could ever have been considered pretty. That his Aunt Ada could ever have been considered pretty seemed beyond belief. Old Josh was dithering on. Yes, pretty as a picture. Sprightly, too. Gay, regular tease. I remember last time I saw her. I was a subaltern just off to India. We were at a moonlight picnic on the beach. She and I wandered away together and sat on a rock looking at the sea. Tommy looked at him with great interest, at his double chins, his bald head, his bushy eyebrows, and his enormous paunch. He thought of Aunt Ada, of her incipient mustache, her grim smile, her iron gray hair, her malicious glance. Time, he thought, what time does to one. He tried to visualize a handsome young subaltern, Subaltern, and a pretty girl in the moonlight. He failed. Romantic, said Sir Josiah Penn with a deep sigh. Ah, yes. Romantic. I would have liked to propose to her that night, but you couldn't. You couldn't propose if you were a subaltern. Not on your pay. We'd have had to wait 5 years before we could be married. That was too long an engagement to ask any girl to agree to. Ah, well, you know how things happen. I went out to India, and it was a long time before I came home on leave. We wrote to one another for a bit, then things slacked off, as it usually happens, and I never saw her again, and yet, you know, I never quite forgot her. Often thought of her. I remember I nearly wrote to her once, years later. I'd heard she was in the neighborhood where I was staying with some people. I thought I'd go and see her, ask if I could call. Then I thought to myself, don't be a damn fool. She probably looks quite different by now. I heard a chap mention her some years later. Said she was one of the ugliest women he'd ever seen. I could hardly believe it when I heard him say that, but I think now perhaps I was lucky I never did see her again. What's she doing now? Alive still? No, she died about 2 or 3 weeks ago, as a matter of fact, said Tommy. Did she really? Did she really? Yes, I suppose she'd be what now? She'd be 75 or 76, a bit older than that perhaps. She was 80, said Tommy. Fancy now, dark-haired, lively Ada. Where did she die? Was she in a nursing home, or did she live with a companion, or... She never married, did she? No, said Tommy, she never married. She was in an old ladies' home, rather a nice one, as a matter of fact. Sunny Ridge, it's called. Yes, I've heard of that Sunny Ridge. Someone my sister knew was there, I believe, a Mrs. Now, what was her name? A Mrs. Carstairs? Carstairs. And maybe it was that. What was her name now? It was something. Let's see. Do you ever come across her? No, I didn't come across anyone much there. One just used to go and visit one's own particular relative. Difficult business, too, I think. I mean, one never knows what to say to them. Aunt Ada was particularly difficult, said Tommy. She was a tartar, you know. She would be, the general chuckled. She could be a regular little devil when she tried, when she was a girl. He sighed. Devilish business getting old, I'll say. One of my sister's friends used to get fancies, poor old thing. Used to say she'd kill somebody. Good Lord, said Tommy. Had she? Oh, I don't suppose so. Nobody seems to think she had. I suppose, said the General, considering the idea thoughtfully, I suppose she might have, you know. If you go about saying things like that quite cheerfully, nobody would believe you, would they? Entertaining thought, though, isn't it? No, entertaining thought, that, isn't it? Who did she think she'd kill? Blessed if I know. Husband, perhaps? Don't know. Who he was or what he was like. She was a widow when we first came to know her. Well, he added with a sigh, sorry to hear about Ada. Didn't see it in the paper. If I had, I'd have sent flowers or something, bunch of rosebuds or something of that kind. That's what girls used to wear on their... Bunch of rosebuds. Okay, that's what girls used to wear on their evening dresses. A bunch of rosebuds on the shoulder of an evening dress. Very pretty it was. I remember Ada had an evening dress, sort of hydrangea color. Mauvey blue. Mauvey blue. And she had pink rosebuds on it. She gave me one once. They weren't real, of course, artificial. I kept it for a long time. Years. I know, he added, catching Tommy's eye. Makes you laugh to think of it, doesn't it? I tell you, my boy, when you get really old and gaga like I am, you get sentimental again. Well, I suppose I'd better toddle off and go back to the last act of this ridiculous show. Best regards to Mrs. T when you get home. In the train the next day, Tommy thought back over the conversation. Thought back over this conversation, smiling to himself and trying again to picture, I keep seeing hair, picture his redoubtable aunt and the fierce Major General in their young days. I must tell Tuppence this. It'll make her laugh, said Tommy. I wonder what Tuppence has been doing while I've been away. He smiled to himself. What time is it? I think I'm going to stop there. I know that's not a whole bunch, but I'm feeling the weariness coming on. We'll stop at part 2. See y'all later, Gators. See you in the YT streets. What's tomorrow? Thursday. That means Dana, Triple C, should be having her Thursday making meet. Hope to see you there. Love you all. Bye-bye.